I've been a straight man my entire life. I think I accidentally just entered a relationship with my male friend. Last year I had to move in with my parents because I was having a hard time finding a new place to rent after a really bad breakup with a girl. My parents and I don't get along great for a lot of reasons, and it made everything a lot worse, so to get out of that I eventually decided to apply for some jobs in other places. At the time I really didn't want to, since I'd lived in that city my whole life and I liked my job, but I just couldn't stay with my parents anymore. I found a job pretty quickly because this hotel was reopening after changing owners and they weren't finding staff easily, so I ended up moving here in October. In the beginning I wasn't socializing much because it's really hard to find friends here when everyone already knows everyone. My country and region are doing well, no confirmed cases in town yet, but it definitely didn't help with making friends. I've also been pretty busy because I decided to buy a house. It just kinda happened because my boss knew the previous owners and it was super cheap since it needed a lot of work, but it definitely made this move feel very permanent. Then in May this guy, Eric, and I got stuck in the social distancing queue outside the pharmacy together and started talking. I told him I was new and he invited me to a barbecue with his friends. Not gonna lie, I'm not great with new people, but they made me feel welcome and were all very nice. After that we just kept hanging out, mostly me and Eric, which I thought was because he was quite careful during these times and only saw his big group of friends outside. Plus we were the only two who weren't in a relationship or had kids, so it made sense in my head that we were alone a lot. I'd cook him dinner and lunch since I'm a chef, and he'd show me great hiking places and help out a lot with the renovations on the house. I also started telling him about the breakup and stuff, and even though I feel like I've moved on, it was still nice that he was so understanding. A week into our friendship, I knew our relationship would be different. I just didn't know what the difference meant yet. Then like 2 to 3 weeks ago he called and asked if I wanted to have dinner on my next night off, and also said, "Just you and me." He seemed kinda weird and formal, but I assumed it was something else going on and just said yes, to which he responded, "It's a date then." I assumed he meant that as a playful line because I have friends who have done that in the past. He picked this restaurant in another town that was relatively fancy that I'd never been to. I drove him home afterwards, he told me goodnight and that he'd had a great time. Usually we're not that formal with each other, but we weren't really acting that different during dinner, so again, I didn't think much of it. Then over the next week or so he started sending hearts in texts and would call me some pet names here and there. This is the first thing that stood out to me a lot. Then earlier this week he grabbed my hand while we were out during his lunch break, and that's when it finally clicked. It really caught me by surprise and I didn't know how to react, so I tried to play it cool and go along with it. Then yesterday he texted and asked if we were still on for our movie night on Sunday. I just said yeah of course, and I started to panic a bit. I grew up pretty conservative and I guess didn't question my preferences a lot, even when I got to university and a lot of other people were. I've always been awkward when it comes to that stuff and I never really made the first move with any of the girls I've dated. But I've been thinking about it for the last few days and I've realized I really like him. All the stuff he's done never made me uncomfortable, quite the opposite actually. He's cute, definitely what I would have said is my type, but like a guy version, and it feels different than any friendship I've ever had. Like again, looking back I definitely wasn't acting super platonic with him. We got close really fast, and if I'm being honest, if he'd been a girl I also would have assumed that's where this was going. My one issue was that I was embarrassed and scared. So we had our dinner and movie night soon after and I was very nervous. Mostly because I was scared that how new it was to me was going to be a deal breaker. But Eric came over and I think he instantly realized I was acting weird. He didn't say anything while he was helping me cook, but then when we sat down to eat he almost immediately asked what was up. So I basically said something like, "I really like you and I want to see where this goes, but I want you to know it's very new to me and I'm not sure you're cool with that." He asked what exactly was new to me and I said I'd only dated girls before. This then led to a conversation where I couldn't avoid telling him that I didn't realize we were dating until that lunch. He actually got really quiet for a few seconds after that and I was scared he was upset, but then he just laughed. Basically, he thought I'd been flirting with him for quite some time and all of his friends had been saying things like, "He seems so into you, it's really obvious, he's probably just too shy to make the first move." He even mentioned some other stuff we or I had done that I gotta admit definitely doesn't sound platonic when he retells it. So, I can see why they thought that, and ultimately they were right I guess. Also, during that lunch he'd apparently thought I was reaching to grab his hand, so he reached out too, otherwise he probably wouldn't have done it because he said he's never been good at making the first move physically. He said when he asked me to dinner that was a huge deal and his friends had tried to hype him up for a while. He explained he was super nervous, so that was probably why I didn't realize that he was asking me out. Anyway, we ended up talking a lot after dinner. He didn't come out publicly until a year or so ago either, so he definitely understood that I don't have a lot of experience. He hasn't had a lot of relationships in general since he hadn't come out, and it's a pretty conservative area, so there aren't a lot of guys who are out of the closet here. He actually admitted that he'd even been nervous to talk to me that first time we met since I looked kind of like a lumberjack. He also knows rumors travel fast here, especially when someone doesn't really fit in, so I guess he was worried that I'd fit the small town conservative type where I've heard all the gossip. The whole "it's a date" thing, for example, would never happen between two guys who are just friends here. I've definitely noticed the culture, and it's something we talked about too, since being out here isn't always easy, so we might try to keep it low-key at first and mostly tell his friends and some of mine. We decided we want to take it slow, but we also realized we've basically been half dating since May, so it felt weird not to make it official. So I guess I've got a boyfriend now.